After studying this module, you should be able to learn about the key concepts and major constructs of the existential approach to counseling. Understand the counseling process involved in the existential paradigm. Examine the counseling procedures and intervention strategies or applications of existentialism, and evaluate the contributions of the existential perspective in counseling. Psychological theories are an intimate reflection of the values and biases of the human realities, and existential theory is no exception. A behavioral approach reflects a theorist to whom science and logic are the organizing factors for existence. An existentialist is a theorist to whom science is complementary to meaning, for whom relationships are as important as the scientific advancement of a theory, for whom the subjective individual experience is as important as the objective, factual report, and for whom the theorist is as much involved in the process as in the product. For an existentialist, the journey is as important as the destination, and the existential journey is not superficial. To explore deeply from an existential perspective does not mean that one explores the past. Rather, it means that one brushes away everyday concerns and thinks deeply about one's existential situation. It means to think outside of time, to think about the relationship between one's feet and the ground beneath one, between one's consciousness and the space around one. It means to think not about the way one came to be the way one is, but that one is. The future becoming present is the primary tense of existential counseling. Yalom, 1980. Unlike traditional psychoanalytic and psychodynamic counselors and therapists, existentialists are not deficiency focused. As reflected in Seligman's theory of positive psychology, existentialist thought is focused on potentialities. Existentialists want to aid individuals in developing schemas to understand and cope with their lives. Zash 2005 contends that it is the existential belief in the inherent worth and capability of individuals that uniquely leaves harsh diagnostic labels for deficiency-based therapies. Likewise, existentialists represent a diverse population. In as many ways that meaning can be gleaned from life, there are avenues to describe the process of finding meaning. Just as some existentialists are more psychodynamic in their orientation, others are more humanistic. Another circle of existentialists seem to be a part of the newest wave in psychology, that is transpersonal theory, whereas other approaches address existential issues through spirituality. For some individuals, meaning emerges from the struggle with life and death, destiny and freedom, isolation and connection. Anticipated by Maslow in 1971, transpersonal psychology and the religiously based counseling approaches offer a haven for those individuals who find meaning in the spiritual realm. The existential philosophers Buber 1970 and Tillich 1987, as well as the psychological theorists Maslow 1968 and Wilber 2000, were explicit that from an existential quest, a spiritual awakening could unfold. For some people, hope emerges from despair. Not all existentialists, however, find meaning through spirituality. Some find that the quest for meaning is always filled with the anxiety of ultimate death. Nevertheless, transpersonal psychology and the approaches emphasizing spirituality are frameworks for examining the process of spiritual development that may surface after scratching the existential veneer. The purpose of this module is to outline the background of existentialism, explore the developmental nature of the quest for meaning, and examine the major constructs of existential thought. In the process of understanding a theory about existence, one can gain a deeper sense of self, an appreciation for what it means to be alive, and a heightened respect for the human struggle of which we are all a part.
Existential counseling was also the focus of Ruska in a study of adolescent females with anorexia and Fisher, who studied adult survivors of sexual abuse. In both situations, presence, authenticity, awareness, and responsibility were vital elements in the healing process. These elements are also essential of existential counseling. In all instances, the researchers suggested that it is important to find meaning, especially at critical points in our lives. Although existentialism does not have the discrete stages, finding meaning has developmental implications. Addressing core existential concerns helps to promote health and further development. Not addressing these core concerns causes individuals to become stuck and develop mental health problems. Existential counseling focuses on the possibilities that are available and stresses the client and the counselor to become more alive, aware, and sensitive while coming to terms with the realities of mortality and aloneness. Roy Sarkar and Yalom examined the development of existential concerns with death. The anxiety produced by awareness of non existence is overwhelming, even to a young child. Most children cope with death by denying it. Parents and other adults foster this denial in the first phase of life by avoidance and hesitant confrontation. By the time of adolescence, however, denial becomes ineffective. Initiation into adulthood reintroduces the reality of death and isolation and necessitates a search for a new meaning. Adults find that aging offers the ultimate loss. As individuals age, the reality of death has an increased complexity and is in danger of being minimized by healthcare professionals. Through each developmental stage, it is easy to encounter denial and avoidance of death. Rather than avoiding the realities of mortality, existentialists see death and aging as the ultimate opportunity to grow. Thus, found that the loss of ability he experienced after a stroke and coming to terms with his own aging providing him with an increased awareness and appreciation of life. The culture sees life as collecting experiences, but aging is an emptying out and beginning to experience the moment, what's happening right now. In our culture, we value old people who act young. We don't value old people for acting old, for their wisdom. For them to hear their own wisdom, they have to experience their own silence. That's one of the ways the stroke was a blessing. It increased my silence. Thus, by facing our mortality in the various stages of our existence, we can come more fully live. Hillman stated that it is denial and fear of death that lead to theories that focuses on development, parents, social conditions, genetic predispositions, and other concerns arising out of human perceptions. As Kruger and Hanna wrote, death has a paradoxical quality in that the fear of it is paralyzing to the individual who avoids it, while at the same time acceptance of its inevitability can free the individual from the trivial life that results from that avoidance. Whether individuals transcend, develop heightened awareness, or are shaken by the struggle, they are forever changed by their confrontation with or their denial of death. The inevitable concerns of the human condition discussed seems to present a bleak picture of life. However, existential therapy is an optimistic and hopeful approach, especially in its perspective that all people have the potential to transcend those inevitabilities and its recognition of people's many strengths, including awareness, authenticity, freedom, and responsibility, actualization, and making meaning. A worldview. Unique among theorists, Existentialists have conceptualized their philosophy in context. They suggest that all theories have usefulness, but they are useful depending on the individuals and issues, as indicated by Bugental. In a discipline that is at odds with itself, it is unique in being able to identify the usefulness of other approaches. Professional theorists seldom see value in approaches that do not fit personal or prevailing preferences. Bugental was the first to see theories in perspective. Others have also seen the value of a broader perspective. Vontres, Johnson, and Epp indicated that existential counselors need to be flexible, integrating other counseling approaches as appropriate for a given client. According to Bugental, there are 6 levels of helping goals, extending from behavioral change to spiritual development. Corresponding to the 6 goals are 6 different types of helping, from behavioral to transpersonal. Existential theory also perceives the individual is an ever changing environment. Within a family, a gender, a language, a culture, a time period, and a system, individuals struggle to find identity and meaning. The existentialist's view of the person can be summed up in 5 tenets, which underlie their philosophy. Number 1, existence precedes essence. What an individual does determines who he or she is. Second, individuals are free to choose and are responsible for the consequences of their choices, their existence. Third, one's life is always lived with a view towards death. One's authenticity derives from one's ability to be aware of this and to courageously confront one's existence. Fourth, one's existence is never completely separate from the existence of others and the world, and the existence of the world is never completely separate from one's existence. And fifth, perception is more valid when an individual tries to understand other persons from his or her subjective point of view. Basic dimensions of the human condition, according to the existential approach, include A. The capacity of self-awareness, B. Freedom and responsibility, C. Creating one's identity and establishing meaningful relationships with others, D. The search for meaning, purpose, values, and goals, E. Anxiety as a condition of living, and F. Awareness of death and non-being. To know more about these conditions, refer to the unfolding of a counseling session in the section of Self-Learn in this module. Proposition 1. The capacity for self-awareness. As human beings, we can reflect and make choices because we are capable of self-awareness. The greater our awareness, the greater our possibilities for freedom. Thus, to expand our awareness is to increase our capacity to live fully. We become aware that, first, individuals are finite and do not have an unlimited time to do what they want to with their lives. Second, individuals have the potential to take action or not to act. Inaction is a decision. Third, individuals choose their action and therefore can, to a large extent, create their own destiny. Fourth, meaning is not automatically bestowed on individuals but is the product of their searching and of their discovering a unique purpose. The capacity for self-awareness. Fifth, existential anxiety, which is basically a consciousness of our own freedom, is an essential part of living. As an individual increases their awareness of the choices available to them, individuals also increase their sense of responsibility for the consequences of these choices. Sixth, individuals are subject to loneliness, meaninglessness, emptiness, guilt, and isolation. And finally, individuals are basically alone, yet they have an opportunity to relate to other beings. Slide 20. We can choose either to expand or to restrict our consciousness. Because self-awareness is at the root of the most are the human capacities. The decision to expand it is fundamental to human growth. Here are some dawning awarenesses that individuals may experience in the counseling process. First, individuals see how they are trading the security of dependence for the anxieties that accompany choosing for themselves. Second, individuals begin to see that their identity is anchored in someone else's definition of them. That is, they seek approval and confirmation of their being in others instead of looking to themselves for affirmation. Third, individuals learn that in many ways they are keeping themselves prisoners by some of their past decisions, and they realize that they can make new decisions. Fourth, individuals learn that although they cannot change certain events in their lives, they can change the way they view and react to these events. Fifth, individuals learn that they are not condemned to a future similar to the past, for they can learn from their past and thereby reshape their future. Sixth, individuals realize that they are so preoccupied with death and dying that they are not appreciating living. Seventh, individuals are able to accept their limitations yet still feel worthwhile, for they understand that they do not need to be perfect to feel worthy. And eighth, individuals come to realize that they are failing to live in the present moment because of preoccupation with the past, planning for the future, or trying to do too many things at once. Increasing self awareness, which includes awareness of alternatives, motivation, factors influencing the person, and personal goals, is the aim of all counseling. It is the counselor's task to indicate to the client that a price must be paid for increased awareness. As we become more aware, it is more difficult to go home again. Ignorance of our condition may have brought contentment along with a feeling of partial deadness, but as we open the doors in our world, we can expect more struggle as well as the potential for more fulfillment. A characteristic existential theme is that people are free to choose among alternatives and therefore have a large role in shaping their destinies. Even though we have no choice about being thrust into the world, the manner in which we live and what we become are the result of our choices. Because of the reality of this essential freedom, we must accept responsibility of directing our lives. However, it is possible to avoid this reality by making excuses. In speaking about bad faith, the existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre refers to the inauthenticity of not accepting personal responsibility. Individuals are responsible for their lives, for their actions, and for their failures to take action. From Sartre's perspective, people are condemned to freedom. He calls for a commitment to choosing for ourselves. Existential guilt is being aware of having evaded a commitment or having chosen not to choose. This is the guilt we experience when we do not live authentically. It results from allowing others to define us or to make our choices for us. Sartre said, "We are our choices." An inauthentic mode of existence consists of lacking awareness of personal responsibility for lives and passively assuming that our existence is largely controlled by external forces. In contrast, living authentically implies being true to our own evaluation of what is a valuable existence for ourselves. Frankl also links freedom with responsibility. He suggested that the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast be supplemented by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. His basic premise is that freedom is bound by certain limitations. We are not free from conditions, but we are free to take a stand against these restrictions. Ultimately, these conditions are subject to our decision. We are responsible. Proposition 3. Striving for identity and relationship to others. People are concerned about perceiving their uniqueness and centeredness, yet at the same time, they have an interest in going outside of themselves to relate to other beings and to nature. Each of us would like to discover a self, that is, to find our personal identity. This is not an automatic process, and it takes courage. As relational beings, we also strive for connectedness with others. We must give of ourselves to others and be concerned with them. Many existential writers discuss loneliness, uprootedness, and alienation, which can be seen as the failure to develop ties with others and with nature. The courage to be. It does take courage to learn how to live from the inside. We struggle to discover, to create, and to maintain the core deep within our being. One of the greatest fears of clients is that they will discover that there is no core, no self, no substance, and that they are merely reflections of everyone's expectation of them. A client may say, "My fear is that I will discover I am nobody, that there really is nothing to me. I will find out that I am an empty shell, hollow inside, and nothing will exist if I shed my masks." The experience of aloneness. The existentialists postulate that part of the human condition is the experience of aloneness, but they add that we can derive strength from the experience of looking to ourselves and sensing our separation. The sense of isolation comes when we recognize that we cannot depend on anyone else for our own confirmation. That is, we alone must give a sense of meaning to life, and we alone must decide how we live. If we are unable to tolerate ourselves when we are alone, how can we expect anyone else to be enriched by our company? Before we can have any close relationship with another, we must have a relationship with ourselves. We must learn to listen to ourselves. We have to be able to stand alone before we can truly stand beside another. The experience of relatedness. Humans depend on relationships with others. We want to be significant in another's world, and we want to feel that another's presence is important in our world. When we are able to stand alone and dip within ourselves for own strength, our relationships with others are based on our fulfillment. If we feel personally deprived, however, we can expect little but a clinging, parasitic, symbiotic relationship with someone else, struggling with our identity. The awareness of our ultimate aloneness can be frightening, and some clients may attempt to avoid accepting their aloneness. Farah points out that some of us get caught up in ritualistic behavior patterns that cement us to an image or identity we acquired in early childhood. He writes that some of us become tapered in a doing mode to avoid the experience of being. A distinctly human characteristic is the struggle for a sense of significance and purpose in life. The underlying conflicts that bring people into counseling and therapy are centered in their existential question. Why am I here? What do I want from life? What gives my life purpose? Where is the source of meaning for me in life? Existential counseling can provide the conceptual framework for helping clients challenge the meaning in their lives. Questions that the counselor might ask are: do you like the direction of your life? Are you pleased with what you now are and what you are becoming? If you are confused about who you are and what you want for yourself, what are you doing to get some clarity? The problem of discarding old values. One of the problems in counseling is that clients may discard traditional values without finding others, suitable ones to replace them. What does the counselor do when clients no longer cling to values that they never really challenged or internalized and now experience a vacuum? Clients report that they feel like a boat without a rudder. They seek new guidelines and values that are appropriate for the newly discovered facets of themselves, and yet, for a time, they are without them. Perhaps the task of the therapeutic process is to help clients create a value system based on a way of living that is consistent with their way of being. Meaninglessness. When the world they live in seems meaningless, client may wonder whether it is worth to continue struggling or even living. Faced with the prospect of our mortality, we might ask, is there any point to what I do now, since I will eventually die? Will what I do be forgotten once I'm gone? Given the fact of mortality, why should I busy myself with anything? A client captured precisely the idea of personal significance when he said, I feel like another page in a book that has been turned quickly, and nobody bothered to read the page. For Frankl, such a feeling of meaninglessness is the major existential neurosis of modern life. Creating new meaning. Logotherapy, developed by Viktor E. Frankl, is one of the methods designed to help clients find a meaning in life. The counselor's function is not to tell clients what their particular meaning in life should be, but to point out that they can discover meaning even in suffering. This view does not share the pessimistic view that some people find in existential philosophy. It holds that human suffering can be turned into human achievement by the stand an individual takes in the face of it. Frankl also contends that people who confront pain, guilt, despair, and death can challenge their despair and thus triumph. Proposition 5. Anxiety as a condition of living. Anxiety arising from one's personal striving to survive and to maintain and assert one's being must be confronted as an inevitable part of the human condition. Existential counselors differentiate between normal and neurotic anxiety, and they see anxiety as a potential source of growth. Normal anxiety is an appropriate response to an event being faced. Further, this kind of anxiety does not have to be repressed, and it can be used as a motivation to change. Neurotic anxiety, in contrast, is out of proportion to the situation. It is typically out of awareness, and it tends to immobilize the person. Because we could not survive without some anxiety, it is not a therapeutic goal to eliminate normal anxiety. Being psychologically healthy entails living with as little neurotic anxiety as possible, while accepting and struggling with normal anxiety that is a part of living. Life cannot be lived, nor death can be forced, without anxiety. Existential anxiety is a constructive form of normal anxiety and can be a stimulus for growth. We experience this anxiety as we become increasingly aware of our freedom and the consequences of accepting or rejecting that freedom. In fact, when we make a decision that involves reconstruction of our life, the accompanying anxiety can be a signal that we are ready for a personal change. If we learn to listen to the subtle messages of anxiety, we can dare to take the steps necessary to change the direction of our lives. Many clients who seek counseling want solutions that will enable them to eliminate anxiety. Although attempts to avoid anxiety by creating the illusion that there is security in life may help us cope with the unknown, we really know on some level that we are deceiving ourselves when we think we have found fixed security. We can reduce anxiety by constricting our life and thus reducing choices. Opening up to new life, however, means opening up to anxiety. Existential counseling helps clients come to terms with the paradoxes of existence, life and death, success and failure, freedom and limitation, and certainty and doubt. As people recognize the realities of their confrontation with pain and suffering, their need to struggle for survival, and their basic fallibility anxiety surfaces. When Durazin Smith contends that an essential aim of existential counseling is not to make life seem easier or safer, but to encourage clients to recognize and to deal with the sources of their insecurity and anxiety. Facing existential anxiety involves viewing life as an adventure rather than hiding behind securities that seem to offer protection. The existential counselor can help clients recognize that learning how to tolerate ambiguity and uncertainty and how to live without props can be a necessary phase in the journey from dependence to autonomy. The counselor and the client can explore the possibility that, although breaking away from crippling patterns and building new lifestyles will be fraught with anxiety for a while, anxiety will diminish as the client experiences more satisfaction with newer ways of being. When a client becomes more self confident, the anxiety that results from an expectation of catastrophe will decrease. Proposition 6: Awareness of death and non being. The existentialist does not view death negatively but holds that awareness of death as a basic human condition that gives significance to living. A distinguishing human characteristic is the ability to grasp the reality of the future and the inevitability of death. It is necessary to think about death if we are to think significantly about life. If we defend ourselves against the reality of our eventual death, life becomes insipid and meaningless. But if we realize that we are mortal, we know that we do not have an eternity to complete our projects, and that each present moment is crucial. Our awareness of death is a source of zest for life and creativity. Death and life are interdependent, and though physical death destroys us, the idea of death saves us. As you read about this counseling session, observe how exploration of the significance of past experiences helps the client develop a greater sense of meaningfulness in her life as well as understanding of some of her emotions and choices. Also note the existential counselor's role. The counseling session begins with the counselor.
Mira, I see great sadness on your face today.
Yes, the weekend was tough. I told you that my husband and I were planning to attend my 20th high school reunion. I bought a new dress, got my hair styled, picked out pictures of my daughter to show off. I thought it would be wonderful, but it was horrible.
How did something you were so looking forward to bring you so much pain?
You remember my telling you that when I was 10 years old, I was diagnosed with cancer? No one thought I would survive, except maybe my father. I had chemotherapy and lost all my hair, and I took steroids to help with the nausea, and that made me gain weight. There I was, disgusting looking, maybe dying, and I was supposed to go to school. If I could drag myself there, the other children would make fun of me, laugh at me, call me badly. I know they did not understand, but it was so awful.
That must have been such a difficult time for you, not only coping with cancer, but also with the teasing. How is the reunion connected with that?
I guess I wanted to show everyone that I had survived, that I was attractive now and had a family. But when I got to the reunion, all those feelings I had when I was 10 came back to me.
So, in your mind, the reunion was to be a life affirming experience, but somehow it was just the opposite. What sense do you make of that?
I don't know.
Meera, you have talked quite a bit about the impact cancer had on your life and your concern that it might reoccur despite the doctor's reassurances. Perhaps that strong fear of death has never left you, and the reminder of the reunion intensified that fear.
That's true. When I hit the 10th anniversary of my cancer diagnosis, the doctor said I was cured, but I never really believed it.
And you're still living as though death is imminent.
Yes, I am. I felt like a fake at the reunion. How could I present myself as a woman who had survived when I knew inside that I was really dying?
Most of us have anxiety about death, but for you, of course, it is particularly strong. How do you think this fear affects your life now?
I worry a lot about dying before my daughter is grown up. She needs me so much, and I don't want to abandon her. I try to do all I can for her while I still have time, but I never feel like I do enough. My husband can't understand. He says I pamper her and I should stop. But she's my only child. I could not get pregnant again because of the cancer. It is a miracle I got pregnant and gave birth to my daughter. She's like a gift from God.
I hear you saying so many important things. The birth of your daughter and your role as a mother have given meaning to your life, and you want to make the most of that. But I also hear a sense of urgency, a fear that time might run out for you before your daughter is grown up, and that terrifies you.
Yes, I still feel like it's just a matter of time before the cancer catches up with me again. Why can't my husband understand that?
You feel very alone. I think one of the hardest things about being human, no matter how much others care about us, they can't really know what it is like to feel the way we feel. That can be very lonely.
That's true. I know my husband loves me and our daughter, but he never does seems to really understand me. Maybe I have been too hard on him and expected too much.
What could you choose to do differently?
Instead of blowing up at him, I could remind myself that he has not been through what I have, that there is no way he could really understand, and that is all right. I have better awareness of myself now that I understand why I treat my daughter the way I do.
How does that fit with the importance in your life of being a good mother?
I love my daughter and will do all I can for her. My husband says it is not good for her, though, that she needs more independence and confidence in herself.
I know your anxiety pushes you to do everything possible for your daughter and to be a different parent to her than your parents were to you. Could it be that your anxiety makes it hard for you to see any value in what your husband is saying?
You mean that I'm scared something bad will happen to my daughter if I don't keep a close watch on her? Yes, I guess I can be overprotective, and I know that's not really good mothering. I want her to feel confident and good about herself, not the way I felt when I was growing up.
At this point, the client has developed a clearer idea of the meaning for her of both her experiences with the cancer and the recent reunion. She is more aware of the impact that her fear of death and her sense of aloneness have on her. She has gained some clarification about the primary purpose of her life, to stay alive so that she can continue to be a good parent to her daughter, and has begun to increase her awareness of both her own behavior and the possible validity of her husband's words. She is now in a better position to make choices that will help her to move towards the meaning she has created in her life, to feel more actualized, and to improve her relationships with both her daughter and her husband.
A summary of this module is as follows. Beginning from a philosophical approach to the world, existentialism has evolved to an approach that helps people cope with the uncertainty and complex pressures of their lives. Recognizing the individual nature of experience in the context of an objective, scientifically oriented society, existential counselors validate the anxiety people experience. The importance of choice and responsibility in coping with these pressures has led existentialists today to honor the individual's experience and realize the religiosity embedded in existential questions. Following the path of early existential theorists, existentialism is grounded in realism, attempting to acknowledge the authentic human experience, the importance of meaning, and the reality of change. Central to the development of this approach and to working through the existential concerns is the importance of connecting with others. The inevitable concerns of the human condition present a bleak picture. However, existential counseling provides an optimistic and hopeful approach that all people have the potential to transcend the inevitabilities of life and its recognition of people's many strengths.